that's when people suspect that they may be doing it for ulterior motives because they want to convert Jews, they cite this verse. And they say, no, we're doing it because we want God's blessing. And we accept this as literally true. That if all those nations that cursed the Jews eventually were destroyed. Pastor John Hagee makes a whole big speech. He's a fantastic speaker. He goes through the whole list. And all those nations that were good to the Jews prospered. He shows historically. And he says all the prosperity in America is because we support Israel. And if America should cease to support Israel, then they're going to face the same consequences. That's the basis of his this particular verse. I'm just pointing it out. Okay? And all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you. Okay? Then it says that Abraham went forth. Okay? But it would appear from here that Avraham left, the purpose of his leaving was because he was responding to the divine command. And it makes no mention, he took with him his nephew Lot, and so on and so forth. But it's clear that the purpose of the leaving was because of God's command to Avraham. Now, if you go back a couple of pages, you have what seems to be a different account. Because it says, go back to page 51. It's giving the genealogies. Okay, it's giving the genealogies coming from Noah and his descendants all the way to Avraham. Now, who was the father of Avraham? Terach. Okay, you're all familiar with Terach, aren't you? Terach was the father of Avraham. So this is going to be exciting about the relationship between a father and a son. You know, sometimes there's tension in the relationship. Here it says that, let me just see. Yeah, here it is. These are, go down to the bottom, 27. Now these are the chronicles of Terach, the begats. Terach begot Abraham, Nachor, and Haran, etc. Haran died in the lifetime of Terach, his father. Okay, that's the brother of Avraham, in his native land, in Ur-Kasdim. And Avraham and Nachor took themselves wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, before her name was changed to Sarah. And the name of Nachor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of, who's that, Lot? I'm sorry, the father of Milcah and the father of Iscah. Okay, and Sarai was barren, she had no child. Now look, we're focusing on the next verse. This is on page 53. Terach took his son Abram and Lot, the son of Haran, his grandson, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the wife of Abram, his son, and they departed with them from Ur-Kasdim to go to the land of Canaan. They arrived at Haran and they settled there. The days of Terach were 205 years, and Terach died in Haran. Now what's difficult about this is that here it would appear the account of leaving Ur-Kasdim over here seems to be different than the account that you get in Lech Lecha. Because in Lech Lecha it seems that it was Avraham. God's command to Avraham, Avraham responded. Here it's Terach. Doesn't mention, Avraham went along, but it seems to be that the motivator, the prime force behind the leaving was Terach. It says that Terach left. Terach took his son. If that's the case, he was the initiator, and Avraham only went along because of Terach. But there's no mention of God's command to leave. Now they set out for the land of Canaan. Okay, it turns out that they stayed in Haran. They didn't make it all the way, right? But it doesn't mention anything at all about God's command to Avraham. That's the issue that we're going to deal with. Okay, there's a seeming discrepancy between the two accounts. In other words, the question is, why did they leave on the journey to Canaan? Why did they leave? And who was the main personality? Was it Avraham responding to God's command? Or was it Terach? We don't even know what the reason is, but this would have you believe that it was Terach. He wanted to go. And he took along his family. That's the question, okay? That's the question that I wanted to address myself to tonight. Okay. Now, there's a couple of answers. There's a couple of classical answers. I know that Some people have a difficulty with it. Yeah, you do have choice. There's a couple of answers. That's Torah study. There are great commentaries, and they give different answers. So I'm gonna share some of the answers with you. One of them, the one we're going to spend our time on is the one I think is more complex. One of them is rather simple. Okay, there is a simple, practical way out of the problem, and that's taken by Rashi. Okay, so Rashi learns as follows: that there were two stages. There was two stages in the departure from Canaan to, the departure from Ur Kasdim to Canaan. First, for whatever reason we don't know, Terach left from Ur Kasdim. Okay, but he did not make it all the way, so to speak. For some reason, he set out on the journey, but he stopped off in Haran. That was it. Okay, that's step number one, and that apparently had nothing to do with God, any command from God. Now they're in Haran. The family's in Haran, and that's where Avraham received the divine vision, the vision, the prophetic vision, which we read about in Lech Lecha. So God was saying, in effect, go for yourself. In other words, go further. Don't stop here. Keep going to the land that I will show you. Okay? So in other words, God then communicated two things to him. One is to go, and two is to separate from your father's house. Okay, so that's a practical. All right, that's a practical. Does anybody want the fan? It's getting a little stuffy. No? You're okay?
Where is Haran?
Haran? In today's world, I'm not really.
No, I don't mean it wasn't in.
It wasn't in Ur Kasdim.
It wasn't in.
That whole region. No. It wasn't in Canaan. The region is, I guess, contemporary Iran and Iraq. That area.
Never got
Yeah. He never got to Canaan. He embarked on the journey. It would appear that that's where he was headed to begin with. I'm sorry, is that Turkey? Could be. Turkey, it's all pretty much in the same geographical location.
Sure is like an
Right? Iran, Turkey, and Iraq, they're all a bunch of troublemakers also. All the trouble in the world comes from the same place. Jake, give me some water, please. Okay, but you get the drift of the. So that's a very simple solution. Okay. But the Even Ezra, who's also a great commentator, he learns differently. Okay, now the Even Ezra utilizes a principle. This is a principle that we do find in the Torah. That not everything in the Torah, not everything in the Torah is necessarily in chronological order. The Torah sometimes reverses the order of things. Okay? I'm not going to take up that whole, the why and the wherefore. That's a separate discussion. But I could prove that. It's not hard to prove. In other words, in general, the Torah is in chronological order, but there are cases where it departs from the chronological. Now, if you say that, what's the matter? You don't like this already.
No, but the simplistic answer
What?
that you just gave seems to be logical.
Yeah.
It's consistent with the commentary. It's consistent with what's written here. Why is it necessary to come up with another answer? I mean, why would anybody even? I mean, why not accept Rashi's explanation because it's consistent and it's logical and it's reasonable. So, what purpose is served by somebody coming up with another explanation? It's almost like a sense of pride. I don't want to believe Rashi.
No, I don't even know if he was aware. You don't even have to
Why
assume.
do it?
Well, he let's assume that he wasn't aware of that answer, and he was facing the same problem, and he was trying to find the solution. But no, because why did Terach leave is what's bothering him. And Terach, I mean, just coincidental? The whole idea of going to Canaan is because of the command of God. Okay? So, let me just tell you what his answer is, though. His answer, and I'll tell you what the difficulty is with it. His answer is that really the command came before Terach left because the order is reversed. That's sometimes hard to follow. Sometimes if you have a movie and the order is reversed, you have to, he's saying really they left because the command of God came to Avraham. Okay? So the Torah is telling you that they left. And in other words, the effect that they left, that's told to us before. Now it's giving you the cause of why they left. The Torah is reversing the order in which things happened. Okay? The Torah is reversing the order. That's a simple answer as well. In other words, because he wants to say that the reason for leaving was because of the divine command. That makes sense to him. If that's the case, then why don't we see the divine command before they left? The answer is that the Torah reversed the order. First, it's showing you the action. A lot of times in a book or a movie, it'll show you the result. Then there'll be a flashback. So at the time you're seeing it, what you're seeing is the result. But the cause, I'll show you later. There's the flashback. It may be for dramatic effect sometimes. You'll see that in movies, right? I mean, you've seen that. You're familiar with that technique, right? You don't know when it's happening, why it's happening. Then later on, there'll be a flashback. Oh, there was a conversation that took place that I was unaware of. So that's a literary device. The Ibn Ezra is saying that the Torah is employing a literary device over here. We may not know, okay. But there's a problem. I mean, that solves, look, you have Rashi's answer is simple, straightforward. See, here's where I told you have freedom of choice. You could say, I like Rashi's answer, I don't like the Ibn Ezra's answer. But our purpose is not to say which one we like. Each one contains certain ideas. Let's see if we can elucidate and see what we can learn from it. Okay. Excuse me, I just want at the end of the day, it's not our purpose to say he was right and he was right or wrong. The Torah is very rich, and we're trying to explore the treasures and whatever we can find out. Oh, but David?
Were Sarah and Iska the same person?
Who?
Sarah and Iska.
And that's what Rashi says. That's what Rashi says.
Is that a minority or a majority opinion?
I don't know.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
if the Torah is given by God, the Word of God, it seems that this, to say, well, sometimes the Torah reverses,
Yeah.
it seems to be kind of a convenient explanation without much logic to it. In other words, a tortured explanation. I mean, why would God give us the Torah that is fairly logical in order, and all of a sudden, once in a while, kind of switch around, and so that it perplexes people. They don't really know, was it before,
Well,
was it after?
that's a good question. That's a very good question. Now, if I could show you that there's profound ideas over here, then you'll look down, I could tell you because there's deep mysteries in, but that wouldn't be satisfying. If I could show you, if we can go through it, okay, and see what we can learn from it, then that'll answer the question by itself.
So Rabbi Soloveitchik would probably have another thing or answer, wouldn't he?
Well, you mentioned the right name. Actually, the inspiration behind this particular class is from an essay by Rabbi Soloveitchik who takes up this issue. Okay, so I'm pretty much following. I have maybe a little bit of a twist, but it's really, the credit goes to Rabbi Soloveitchik. Okay, but as I said, you're going to have to be a little bit patient. Okay, the question. Now, I always have emphasized how important it is to ask good questions. That's, in Judaism, asking the right question. It's more than half the battle, knowing what the appropriate questions are, because the questions will lead us. Now, the real question you should ask on the Ibn Ezra is, he's maintaining, see, Rashi saves himself from this, because according to Rashi, Terach, whatever reason, Terach left. So the Torah is giving the credit to Terach. But if, according to the Ibn Ezra, the departure took place after the divine command, who was the divine command given to? It was given to Avraham. And who had the courage and the faith to be able to pick himself up and go? It's really Avraham. So why is the Torah giving the credit to Terach? That's the question. That's the logical question on the Ibn Ezra, because the Torah is presenting it as though the impetus to go is Terach. Terach took. It's not mentioning, but it's not. But that wouldn't be right. It should really be Avraham.
But if the original command was to Avraham, the command was that he should leave all his relatives, he
Right.
should leave everybody.
Right.
Well, he didn't, because they all went together to, wherever this place was, to Haran. I mean, in other words, if the original command was given to him to leave everybody, then Haran wouldn't have been involved. Abraham would have picked himself up and taken off.
That's a good point.
You know,
You're asking good questions, okay? But I would say, in answer, I would defend, because now my job is to defend the Ibn Ezra, okay? I would answer that was the nature of the command, that you leave, and even if it means leaving your father's house, okay? Indeed, in fact, it did wind up, but man has free will. If Terach decides to go along with you, then that's okay too.
Okay.
See, in other words, God, when I'm giving you the command, I'm telling you, you be prepared to leave your father's house if necessary. But afterwards, if you tell him and he wants to come with you, then fine. Okay, that answers that question. All right. But again, after all is said and done, how can you give the credit to Terach and make it appear as though it was Terach who left? If anything, Terach, the Yiddish would be a nachschlepper. He schlepped along with them. A nachschlepper is someone who goes along, straggles along with somebody else. That, I think, that's where Rabbi Soloveitchik raises the question. And that, I think, is the biggest question on that particular approach. Okay, I have no problem with the reversal of the order, but then it should merely say that if it would have said Avraham left, then wouldn't tell you why he left. And then a few pages later it says the command, okay, but it's consistent. But the problem over here is that it's not consistent. It's a separate version in which the credit is now being given to Terach. That's the question. Okay, now, here we have to make use. There's much about the life of Avraham that's not recorded in the Torah. Okay? In fact, the Torah doesn't even record what was special about Avraham and why God related to him and so on and so forth. And everything that, not me, is it? And everything that I've taught you and the Rambam has taught us about Avraham, it's not written that Avraham was an idol worshiper, that his parents were idol worshippers, right? All that whole history of Avraham, that comes to us via the so-called oral law that was passed down. Why? And it's not like many things, it's not recorded openly in the Torah. Now you know this, what about Terach? Terach, his father, was an idol worshiper. Everybody knows that. We read that in the Haggadah. That is in the book of Joshua. When we read, right? Joshua said to the Jews, right? You should know that your ancestors worshipped from olden times, worshipped idols. And it mentions Terach, the father of Abraham, right? So it mentions specifically. See, you don't always have, the Torah doesn't always communicate everything in one place. Sometimes you have to look at all the various places and then put it together. But definitely, the information that we have, the bulk of the information that we have about Avraham comes from the oral law. And these are midrashim, okay? But these are not ordinary midrashim. These are real that have been passed down. Of course, the Rambam records it as history. The basic history is that Avraham was raised, his father Terach was an idol worshiper, and that he worshipped with them. But from the age of 3, he began to question. Okay, he was a genius. He was precocious, and at the age of 40, it took a long time, 37 years, he discovered his Creator. Okay, but he worshipped together with his parents. Then, as you know, once he discovered the truth, he began to refute, to set disputations, religious disputations. He began to refute them, and he eventually got into trouble. This is crucial. He got into trouble with the king. Because, any independent thinker who's challenging the religious premises of the time is always going to get into trouble. And the king wanted to kill him. King wanted to kill him. Now, you know the story, he was cast into the fiery furnace, and he was saved by a miracle. Okay. We have that in Scripture, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, that were cast. In other words, the idea that great people, were cast into the fiery furnace, and that they were saved by a miracle, that's something that Judaism accepts, if it's based upon genuine prophecy. However, the Rambam does not mention that he was cast into the fiery furnace. So maybe there's some question as to exactly how far it went, the miracle of Avraham being saved. But he does say that he was saved miraculously. In other words, the king would have killed him, and God performed a miracle, and Avraham was saved. Okay, so now you have the idea that Terach, according to the rabbis, was really deeply steeped in idolatry. In fact, they say he was a manufacturer, a producer of idols. And so now you have a tremendous conflict between a father who was steeped in the religion of the time and his son who was a rebel. And he went about refuting and destroying idolatry and physically destroying the idols. Now, that's one piece. Here's another piece. That's brought down. The Rambam does not include this, so I don't know whether you must accept this particular fact, but it's very germane. And that is that the father, was so incensed by Avraham and his activities that he himself turned him over to the authorities. That he himself advised the king to kill him. This is what Rabbi Soloveitchik says. This is brought down by Midrashim. As I said, the Rambam accepts the idea that his life, he was in danger of dying, and he was saved. The Rambam doesn't mention that his father is the one who turned him over. It may be that it's not that important to do, but he says like this. He says, when a father's antipathy towards a son reaches the level of enmity, it is often psychopathological. While enmity towards a stranger is not always a sign of a sick mind or mental aberration, this kind of hostility between father and son is due to, quotes, to a sick soul and a personality permeated with hatred and insanity. The sages therefore tell us the story of Terach's hostility towards Abraham, for he saw his son destroying everything that he, Terach, had worked to accomplish. Okay? So now, the idea, by the way, you see, religion can bring out fanatical behavior in people. This may sound hard to believe. How could a father give over his son to be killed? Generally speaking, in Judaism, we say that's a very extreme thing. Where, for example, you're allowed to defend yourself. Stand your ground. If somebody breaks into your house, according to Jewish law, if somebody breaks into your house at night to rob, you're allowed to kill him. Because the assumption is that he's going to shoot you if you stand up to defend yourself, right? However, if it's your father, if you know it's your father and he's because he's desperate for money, whatever it is, okay, then you can't kill him. Because the assumption is a father would never kill his son. That's the general assumption. However, when you're dealing with idol worshippers, you see, we could see a lot of these things that sound strange, the truth. Today you could see the mentality of the religious fanatic, most specifically in the case of not just ISIS. I mean, these people are fanatic. They just executed village hundreds of men, women, and children. And they're Muslims. These people generally, not just the Christians who they hate, but Muslims, if they don't have the exact same theology. So they have you could see they would kill their own. They would kill their own child if the child turned against them in any way, even if it adopted a different version. Why? Because when a person is steeped in idolatry, he becomes a fanatic for idolatry. It destroys all the ordinary human emotions of compassion, which you can see they have no compassion. Netanyahu put it very well. He said that the Nazis regard themselves as the master race, and the ISIS regards itself as the master faith. That's the way he put it, which is a pretty good way of putting it, the master faith. Same idea. And so you could see that a person like Terach, if he's steeped in an idolatrous phenomenon, in fact, it warns us that we shouldn't emulate the ways of the Molech. Molech is where they gave their children over to the fire god to be consumed in fire. So that's what the Torah says. We shouldn't copy them because they do the greatest abominations. Something which is totally contrary to to human nature. So that's the nature of the situation. Yet over here we see that Terach took, something must have happened. Something must have happened. It says later on in our parsha, let me find the place in Lech Lecha. Oh, after the vision of Avraham, the covenant between the parts.
Which parts?
The parts of the animal, that they cut the animal in half and the furnace went through. When God made the covenant with that, and when God foretold the prophecy about the enslavement in Egypt. Okay? That's on page 69. Page 69. Okay? That's a very lengthy prophecy.
Is the covenant between God and the Jewish people made at Sinai much different than the covenant between the parts?
Yeah. Yeah, well, the covenant with Abraham was the covenant that his descendants would occupy the land, would become the Jewish nation, would be enslaved, and so on and so forth. But that's a covenant that was made between God and the patriarchs, the forefathers. They had their role to play. Okay? But that doesn't mean that the Jews themselves will accept the Torah, because they have free will. Okay? It would eventuate, because they lived their lives in a certain way, and so to speak, prepared the ground for it, there emerged a people in Egypt and so on and so forth. But you're right, it wasn't complete. It wasn't complete until if the Jews said, we're not going to go to Sinai, then that wouldn't have happened. God didn't force them in that way. So, yeah, the covenant at Sinai was when they accepted the Torah. So that's different. But in order to get to that point, you needed other covenants along the way. Okay. Now, what does it say? After telling Avraham all this stuff, the fourth generation will return here because the sin of the Amorite will not be complete. Oh, take a look at verse 15. But you will come unto your fathers in peace. You'll be buried in a goodly old age. Okay? So what is that? So Rashi is bothered by that. What do you mean you'll come to your fathers? Now really, that's an expression for death, right? Because you sort of join up with your fathers, in a manner of speaking. Okay? But he's bothered. What's he bothered by? He's bothered by...
having a child.
Huh? No, his fathers.
Oh.
So, but he's bothered. He says his father is an idol worshiper, and God is saying you're going to come unto him. That whole expression shouldn't be used in this case, because that implies, like, you would say that about a righteous person. Now the son, when the son dies, he joins together with his father. His father was a righteous person, and he was a righteous person. But if the father was a big Rasha, was a wicked person, you don't say to the son who's a big tzaddik, you're going to join together with your father. It doesn't make sense. So Rashi is saying the Torah couldn't use such an expression. So what do we deduce from this? What are we to deduce from that? That Terach did what? Terach did tshuva. That Terach did teshuvah.
In this world or the next?
In this world. This is the world. You can't really, the truth of the matter is you really cannot do tshuva in the next world. This world is the vestibule. If you do tshuva in this world, even on the last day, then you'll get into the next world. But if you don't, the Rambam says don't put it off. Do it now.
You need a lot of help.
You need a lot of help. Yeah, but that's an amazing factor. That's an amazing factor that this individual who was steeped in idolatry, to the extent that he was involved somehow even in turning over his own son to the authorities, that this individual did a complete transformation. He did teshuvah. You have to say he did teshuvah. Why? Because how could you imagine? Why did he leave Ur-Kasdim? Ur-Kasdim was the homeland, so to speak. That was the capital of idolatry. That's where he had his business. I mean, like in our terms today, if you were selling Christmas trees, that would be the place. In the metropolis. He's leaving to go to some foreign place. That means he's leaving. When a person is making a move of that dimension, it's not like today when you're still in contact, with the cell phones. That's it. That kind of a move means you're cutting yourself off completely. That itself you have to stop in your tracks and ask yourself, why is he doing that? But not only that, if we go back to let's go back to, I know we're going up and back a lot, but I can't help it. But there seems to be a tremendous reconciliation over here, doesn't there, from the verses? because it says that, this is on page 53, Terach took his son Avraham. And lo, it seems that there was a tremendous reconciliation, first of all, between the two main figures, between Avraham and Terach. They were the two main protagonists. Okay, they were the two main protagonists. And what a rocky relationship between father and son. By the way, this is a very inspiring story for all parents who've had this, who've gone through this periods of tremendous, what's the word? Alienation. No, I mean, you see, the themes of the Torah are relevant to every aspect of life. There are many parents, many religious parents experience this. You shouldn't think, I mean, it's not just parents that aren't that religious. Some of the most religious parents, their children become tremendously, alienated, and they give up Judaism. They can marry out, despite all the best efforts of the parents. So you find it in the Torah. Esav, who was Esav's father? Yitzchak. So Yitzchak was a great tzaddik, but he gave one of his sons was Yaakov, right? But one of his sons was Esav. So therefore, a person, this is a very inspirational story. A person shouldn't always blame himself. A person should write Chet one time. I'll mention it because everybody here is a parent, and everybody feels as responsible and maybe guilty about certain things. But he said that parents should not necessarily feel guilty, necessarily, if their children went off the path. And parents shouldn't necessarily be proud if the children turn out to be really terrific. He says, because sometimes you do everything, the right thing, whatever you could do, and the child turns out, he says, because you can't produce another child. The child has his own mind, he has free will. I mean, you try and guide him, you try and lead him, but you could have given good guidance. But there are many other influences in his life, all right? And they could have affected him, and it's not always you. Conversely, you'll find parents that are the worst possible parents. They spend no day, they abuse it, and the kid can turn out to be a wonderful, productive genius. What? Then the parent feels proud. Look at my son. But he has no right to feel proud. And nor does the parent whose son has turned out the bad way should necessarily, he said, your feeling of whether you feel guilty or not should be based on, did you do the right actions? If you did the right actions to the best of your ability, then that's what you base yourself on. Because the outcome you don't have control over. And the same is true the other way around. Don't be a big shot and take all the credit when you did nothing for your kid. But due to other circumstances, he turned out to be great. Yeah, but you should feel guilty because you weren't a good parent. Somebody raise their hand? Yeah.
So, I think you kind of misheard me there earlier. I'm saying Terach had a lot of help.
Yes.
He had a lot of help. Why do I say that? Because if you're, even in today's world, if you have two brothers come from, and let's say one's an atheist and one is completely believing in God, and the one that believes in God is tremendously well blessed in wealth and family and attracting lots of people because of that, and is explaining his wealth, due to his relationship with God. It's like it's in your face, and it's really hard to hold on to your own belief of being an atheist or something, or you're an idol worshiper, whatever it is. When here it is, your family member who is so different than everybody else, but he's blessed more than everybody else. I mean, it's like, if he wasn't blessed any different than anybody else, you'd say, oh well, he's a weirdo. But when you see how he's so well blessed in so many ways, and who knows how many of the prophecies that Abraham had from Hashem that he conveyed to his father that did come true, there's a lot of evidence there. So that's what I'm saying, that maybe Terach had a little bit of help.
Terach had a little bit of help. Yeah, I would agree with that.
I mean, you can't deny that the wealth was influencing, even the other people that convert over.
No, Abraham wasn't necessarily wealthy at this time, was he?
Yeah, I don't know if you could bring in the wealth factor because we don't have that piece of information that it was
No,
because
he was really wealthy.
But at this point in
He
time,
was a fugitive. The king was trying to kill him.
So maybe we don't know how many people are converted now. We know that at a certain time in his lifetime, he was extremely wealthy, and there was a tremendous number of converts.
Well, we're going to try to, well, first of all, we're going to try and understand a little bit more about this tshuva that Terach did. But then the next question, how does that answer the question we started out with? Because the question we started out with was that according to the Even Ezra, Avraham received the prophecy before they left, and really he's the one that should be given the credit for leaving, and yet the credit for leaving seems to be given to Terach. That's what we're going to have to. Okay. But I would say that you could understand. Sometimes, see, Avraham engaged in these disputations. I mean, I'd say first and foremost, he wanted to teach his parents. That's the one that's closest to him. They raised him, and it seems they had a good relationship, right? Because it says he worshipped with them. But once he discovered the truth, he probably, first and foremost, he wants to persuade his father. Sometimes the arguments, it could be that sometimes a person is filled with rage because it's challenging his whole way of life, but sometimes the arguments make sense. And he couldn't really come up with he couldn't come up with a good refutation, and he was tremendously threatened. Avraham became a tremendous threat. If Avraham didn't have good arguments, then he would have just ignored it. The Jew is a threat because the Jew has good arguments. So maybe he was in a state of conflict. Avraham was getting through to him on a logical level. Some of you have experienced this. Sometimes a person, encounters another individual that's trying, that's trying to bring them close. They get into discussions about religion, and emotionally, you don't want to hear it, but logically, something is getting through. Okay? He was in a state of conflict. But at the first stage, the emotion overpowered everything. And he turned against him. He even hated him. Let's assume he gave him over. That's how frustrated he was. But something happened. A big miracle took place. He saw that Avraham, that's a huge game changer. Once he saw that Avraham was saved by a miracle, then he began to rethink things. When he began to rethink things, the arguments of Avraham made perfect sense. What am I worshiping? Something that I built myself? Then you see that sometimes you need an emotional experience to clear the way, so that the mind, once he had that emotional experience, that Avraham could not be destroyed. Then he went back to the arguments, and he thought it over, and he recognized the truth. That's a tremendous transformation, though. Not everybody could do that, because some people are so angry and stubborn that's the danger. They take such extreme positions that even if logically they realize that they're wrong, but they can't bring themselves to admit it. The fact that he was able to admit that he was wrong on a matter of such significance, and to renounce idolatry, to the extent that we have to leave this. That's basically what it means. Leave this, let's get out of this place. Let's start a new life. Terach wanted to start a new life. And indeed, at that point in time, he even was going to go to Canaan. I was on his mind to go to Canaan. But how far can you separate? They came to Haran. He didn't want to go any further. That's enough for me. Okay? It was away from the metropolis. It was outside of Manhattan. Okay, let's put it that way. So maybe it was an hour away. That's as far as like a nice town and village. But to go all the way to a completely, that he didn't do. But nevertheless, that's a great achievement. That's a great achievement. So the question, so now I think we can answer the question. The Torah is not just concerned with telling us about the great achievement of Avraham. There's a bigger lesson over here, strangers. The bigger lesson is the lesson of the whole Torah is based upon the idea that people can do tshuva. The so-called perfectibility of man. That people, no matter how bad it looks, the whole purpose of the Torah is we pray for that on Rosh Hashanah. That mankind should renounce idolatry and recognize Hashem. When you look around at the world, it's impossible. People are steeped. Look at ISIS. They're steeped in their crazy beliefs. But the Torah wants to tell you that it's possible. How do I know? Terach. Terach represents the ultimate. He was the ultimate idolater who was prepared to destroy his own son. You see? So that's what in telling us that Terach, the fact that Terach went, whether he went because of the command of God or whether he went because of his own volition, because he wanted to get away from idolatry, that's more important, says the Ibn Ezra. At this point in time, the Torah is more concerned with telling you about Terach, that an idol worshiper as extreme and fanatic as him can change his pathway in life. I would like that's basically Rabbi Soloveitchik's answer. Let me see if I can read it to you.
That entire story is all in the oral Torah. There's none of that in the written.
Yeah, I said that before. Let me just read to you from this is another great book. I always share great books with you.
And what's that book?
I'm sorry?
What book is
This is called, well, the Hebrew is Darash Yosef, but the English Discourses of Rav Yosef Dov Halevi Soloveitchik on the weekly portion. It wasn't written by Rabbi Soloveitchik. He didn't write many books, but the students, now they're coming out, the students compiled notes, they listen to tapes, and it reads as though, it's really very nicely done. Also, if you remember the book I told you about by my student, the Rambam and Rabbi Soloveitchik on the Parsha, I got copies if anybody wants to purchase them. He says like this. This is Rabbi Soloveitchik, who's saying the Ramban, he's the one who asked this question. Ramban's difficulty with the Ibn Ezra is now easily explained. Even though the order is rearranged, and the mitzvah, the commandment of Lech Lecha, was given earlier to Avraham, it still makes sense that Terach is described as the central protagonist at the end of the Parsha of Noach. This is because the Torah has a primary interest in the metamorphosis of Terach, over and above Avraham's obedience to God's command. The Torah is more interested in that at the time. You see the profundity of it? There's a reason then for the rearranging of the order. Therefore, the text emphasizes Terach's initiative, even though God's command to Avraham of Lech Lecha preceded the family's migration. Abraham had only limited success with other individuals, such as Nachor and Lot. However, his success with his father was enduring and extraordinary. Now he makes this point that we've been talking about. How much Judaism values not just the great thinker and discoverer, but the great teacher. See, the greatness of Avram, the reason why God had a covenant with him and so on and so forth, was not because of his great discoveries per se, because he used those great discoveries and he decided to become the teacher of man. It's the teacher. A great teacher must be capable of inspiring and convincing his own family. Abraham had a great vision to transmit. When he succeeded in converting his father, he receded momentarily into the background. The Rambam says that the obligation to honor one's parents applies even to a father who is wicked. Although Terach had been wicked for much of his life, he became a great Baal Tshuva, means someone who did Tshuva. And Abraham was obligated to show him respect in any case. Well, that's a separate lesson in addition to that. He never gave up on his father. His departure to Canaan is a heroic act. For now, Abraham stays in the shadows. So I would say that therefore you have two reasons why the Torah is giving the credit to Terach. Terach, again, he reconciliation with Avraham and with the entire family. He brought the entire family together, which is only conceivable if you assume that he was a Baal Tshuva. If he remained a wicked person and an idol worshiper, and Avraham is worshiping the true God, then that's it. That breaks up, and you see yourself how religious differences can break up a family. How much more so when they're of that kind of a dimension. So first of all, it wants to show you, to teach you the lesson that people are capable of change. That a person can become a Baal Tshuva, even the most wicked individual. At the furthermost end of the spectrum of idolatry, that's an inspiring thing. That he's capable of acknowledging his mistake and returning to what he was taught. At the time he was taught, he rejected it, but now it was waiting for him. Once he got rid of that crazy emotion. And I say indirectly, by giving Terach the credit, who is really getting the credit? Avraham. Because the story of Terach is the story of Avraham. So if you ask, well, why doesn't Avraham get the credit? The fact that a man like Terach is leaving and he's reconciled. He's reconciled, that means he retained the relationship. He didn't hate his father. After his father had done everything to destroy him, you see how Torah can unite people. In spite of all of that, it's not only that when he, look at all the lessons over here. Not just that he did tshuva, but and what about what you tried to do to me? What about the agony that he put Avraham through, the fiery furnace or whatever else it is, whether it's literally. Imagine someone is trying to kill you and you're waiting to be killed and it's your own father. And then you're saved. And then you're saved. Well, I guess maybe he was rewarded because, in a sense, that's what Avraham did to Yitzchak, and Yitzchak forgave him. Yitzchak never held it against him. Yitzchak never went the Akedah, But all right, that's a separate point. But clearly, Avraham didn't hold it against him. That greatness of spirit to be able to recognize that it's not his fault. It's the power of idolatry. And now that he recognizes the truth, that he should be forgiven, he should be respected. To be able to respect, look at all the lessons, Kibbud Avim, to be able to respect his father who tried to kill him. But that's different. That's because he was an idol worshiper. He had a certain compassion for him. And now that he's given it up, we're going to be reconciled. You see? So the Torah wants to emphasize that metamorphosis. That's more important at this point in time than Avraham listens to Hashem. That can wait. The Torah, by bringing it in later on, he's going to tell you that's the reason for the change. That can wait. This is more important. This comes first. And finally, as I'm saying, that in a sense, it is giving the credit. Because it's telling you that the real credit to Avraham is not just that he was able to leave, but that his whole mission in life was dedicated to teaching mankind. And that's what the Torah values. Not just that the person should strive for truth and just keep it to himself, but that the person that goes out and decides to become the teacher of mankind, in spite of all the dangers, in spite of the ridicule, in spite of the challenges, in spite of the rejections, that's the great man. That's the great person. That's ultimately the mission of the Jewish people. That's what the Jewish people is supposed to be doing. So when the Jewish people decides to become, and I've made this point many times, a rabbi is not, in my opinion, cannot be politically correct and do his job. He can't. That means he has to sacrifice his popularity on a certain level. It doesn't mean he has, has to get everybody to hate him, although that sometimes does happen. But he cannot be a person who's politically correct, because politically correct means I got to appease everybody and make them happy. Then I'm not doing my job. Then you're not proclaiming the truth. You have to be able to proclaim the truth. If you could do it in a way and everybody, that's fine. But if there will be times when it's going to go against the grain, and you're going to, you're going to receive a lot of anger, and people will be upset with you, or rejection. And worse, it could be a lot worse than that. But that's the mission of the Jewish people. And the Jewish people also should be apart from the nations. Should not be a politically correct, just typical political correctness and the liberalism and this and that and espousing. And it goes down, we're not talking about every particular, when it comes even to fighting wars and so on and so forth. We have our own morality. The Jewish people has to return to its own morality, its own concept of how things should be done, because that's the way Hashem commands us, and not worry about currying favor with the nations, just like Avraham did not worry about currying favor with anyone. That's the true story. And that I think fully explains, in light of this, we see the great benefit of Rashi gives you a practical answer, but the Even Ezra gives you an answer which reveals a degree of profundity that we never would have noticed if we had just read the story superficially. Okay, glad to have you. Welcome back. This is the first. Hopefully we'll have many more. I don't know how many people are that normally would come. We sent out the info, right? Where's Jacob? We sent out the info. We'll try. If there's anybody that people that, just tell them Tuesday night. It'll be Tuesday at 6 in the cabana. And thank you all very much. Okay, guys. So that's it for tonight, okay? I'm talking to the people on the phone. Okay, Jim, take care. We'll probably see you on Sunday. Talk to you on Sunday, okay? All right, great. Take care. Bye.
Where do we put it?
Okay.
Where do we put
Good,
it?
good.
Here's a question for you to ponder,
Okay.
not to answer, but to ponder.
I need a ponder, right?
Okay.
We'll put them back in here, John.
Covenant of circumcision
Yeah.
is ready.
I'll ponder it.
One of these days.
I have some ideas. We'll put it all together, okay?
Antibiotics.
And